still the #1 television network with the #1 primetime lineup, ABC. Comedy is still king, and we've got a full house.
I'm going to give that driver a severe reprimand. We here at the Sunshine Cab Company expect all our cabbies to be kind and courteous to every passenger, especially you blimpos.
The cabbies drive the hacks, and Louie drives them crazy on Taxi.
Battle of the Network shows. Join Rick Brooks and Mike Kogel as they explore the TV of the 70s and 80s through hand-picked episodes of their favorite and not-so-favorite series. Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Battle of the Network shows. This is Rick, here with my friend Mike.
Hey.
Today we're going to talk about one of the fondest remembered sitcoms, I think, of our BOTNS era, Taxi.
Possibly a higher quality show than we sometimes talk about.
I think this is probably one of the better ones we've talked about. I also think it's probably more appreciated now in some ways than it was during the time, but it was a very successful show critically. It won Emmys. You know, it was best comedy series several times, outstanding comedy series several times. It ran 5 seasons, but it has a reputation for being a critical hit, but a ratings failure, which I think is a little... It's maybe a little bit more complicated than that, but it did change networks. It ran 4 seasons on ABC, moved to NBC for its 5th and final season, had some cast changes along the way, but it's basically an ensemble workplace comedy with an outstanding cast, some of whom have moved on to bigger things, some of whom we haven't heard as much from, but it's New York City taxi cab drivers and sort of their lives, and I guess they mostly work this night shift, and famously inspired by a New York Magazine article about night cabbies in New York City, and this was adapted into this sitcom. Had the Charles brothers, who went on to create Cheers, were involved with this. The great Jimmy Burrows was also involved as a director, and there's a lot of talent behind them.
Yeah, James L. Brooks.
James L. Brooks, yes.
Filmmaker, and of course one of the people behind The Simpsons, and Sam Simon.
Yeah.
Who was a big part of The Simpsons.
Yes, and I believe wasn't Ed Weinberger was
Ed
involved in this as well.
I'm really fascinated by that.
Still not sure what's up with that period. But,
I did see his full name is Edwin.
Yeah, well, maybe
so
that's
maybe
why.
he just disliked Edwin so much that. And somebody else, Barry Kemp, who I think did Coach, right?
He wanted to go Coach, but I won't hold that against him.
Wasn't he involved in Newhart too?
Yes.
Yeah.
So a lot of talent behind the camera, and this is the show that famously launched Danny DeVito as dispatcher, Louie De Palma, sort of the
lecherous.
Yes, the main heel of the show, the guy people love to hate. Judd Hirsch was like the anchor, as Alex Rieger, the kind of everyman and sensible person at the center of this workplace. Then you had Andy Kaufman as Latka, who was an adaptation of his foreign man character that he was doing in stand-up and on Saturday Night Live and that sort of thing. So he was the mechanic. Then the other drivers, Mary Lou Henner was Elaine Nardo, who was an aspiring, he was like an art student. And Jeff Conaway was Bobby Wheeler, an aspiring actor. Tony Danza was Tony Banta, an aspiring boxer. So, and as I think Alex says in the pilot, he says, "Me, I'm just a cab driver," Yeah. So it's kind of a sitcom about people that share this lifestyle, but they all are also like kind of searching for other things. And I think one thing that has, it's a very funny show, but it also has like a certain air of melancholy about it a lot of times, and people like striving things, and it definitely goes for humanity. I think as the show went on, it became a little bit, sometimes it was trying to be a little bit more, it got broader, but it also would have like these more like kind of almost very special episodes. And almost forgot Christopher Lloyd joined the cast as Reverend Jim. Right. Pretty much in the second season, he was kind of like the burned out, who there's always more to him than met the eye, but
he was son of a wealthy man, and
Yeah.
what's it? He like took drugs once in the '60s, and it
Yeah.
totally burned him out.
Yeah, and lots of things happen to him over the course of the season. He gets this. He inherits all this money, but it turns out there's several episodes where he's got a lot more talents than you might have known.
And wisdom hiding in his madness.
Right. So this is a show that Mike. Were you a fan of Taxi?
No.
Before it was more of an adult sitcom, right?
Yeah, like I remember friends and dad watching it, and then I saw reruns of it, but scattered reruns. So it's like I know all the characters and I know it, the gist of it, but I've never really sat down and watched a lot of it. And knowing it's good and knowing it's in the same mode as like Cheers and Newhart and even later like News Radio, like workplace sitcom, but also kind of like a combination workplace like hang kind of sitcom, and it had an ensemble. Like I know the feel of everything about it, just haven't seen a lot of it.
Yeah, I was kind of in a similar place until actually like some years ago, not too long ago, but when, this might date it to a certain time when Netflix still rented a lot of DVDs. I sort of became hooked on it, and I started running the DVDs from Netflix. I think it was on like one of the retro stations. I watched it, and then I wanted to watch a lot more of it, so I started getting the DVDs from Netflix and kind of catching up that way.
Yeah.
So watching a lot of it, I kind of burned through the whole series like kind of in a relatively short. Most of it. Yeah. Most of it. So like most of my memories of the show are from actually that time watching it. I'd seen it a little bit before, like here and there, but it was never like one of my favorite shows. And actually, I didn't really care for a lot of the characters until later. I didn't appreciate a lot of the actors. It was only like later on when I realized, wow, this is a really good show, and I really got really into it. Sort of the thing where, yeah, it's funny, but really, it's like the characterizations of it got me. I mean, there were sort of like identifiable characters, and that sort of atmosphere of it, kind of unique, I think, to Taxi, as opposed to like a lot of the other stuff that was on at that time.
Yeah, like I think maybe the slightly depressing air about it.
Yeah.
Maybe put me off a little bit too.
Yeah,
it's a kind of dirty, and it's still that period where New York was pretty dirty.
Yeah.
And the fact that they are all people either in between where they want to be or clearly people who are never going to get where they want to be. Or like Alex, who doesn't want to get anywhere else.
Yeah.
That can be a little bit of a downer. And, but on the other hand, certainly even as a kid, wherever I saw it, I had seen it by the time Back to the Future came out, so I knew who Christopher Lloyd was, and I knew, and Jim, of course, would be a character that would appeal to a kid.
Yeah.
You see, because he's hilarious.
Yeah.
And Danny DeVito, of course, you knew, and he had his sort of, not based on talent, I'm saying unwarranted movie stardom, but kind of surprising movie stardom in a way. And I watched Dear John with Judd Hirsch.
Yeah.
So I knew him by the time that was on, and definitely appreciated his talents. Of course, Evening Shade.
Yeah.
Maybe like seeing Andy Kaufman on there, and then seeing reruns of SNL where he would be doing that, like he did that character some on there, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because like Andy Kaufman, that character really annoyed me.
Yeah.
Like Latka, and he's still not exactly my favorite character, but I appreciate him more now. But I like more of the episodes where he like steps out of being Latka.
Yeah, right.
There's just something about that kind of stock character, like the foreigner that
Yeah.
is sometimes wiser than you think, and sometimes that goes a little bit with Jim too. He's like they had these like wacky characters that almost seem like they belong in different shows because on the one hand you got this gritty realism of like the setting. I mean, a lot of it takes place in this dispatch station, and it's dirty, like you say, and it's this big open air where they're all hanging out, and like the coffee machine dispenser is kind of grungy and all this stuff. But on the other hand, you've got like sort of these really broad sitcom premises and these characters and some surreal, might be a polite way of putting it, and some downright unbelievable situations that happen. So there's kind of a juxtaposition of all that too. But I definitely appreciate it more than I did back in the day. I wasn't a huge watcher of it in reruns. It's more of an occasional thing when it was on.
Yeah, and let's give Like a legitimate praise to Jim Burrows, who it seems like the master of that kind of sitcom, especially like with the big cast and in like a big space.
Yeah.
Like Cheers and that and the Mary Tyler Moore Show. And he did, I know he...
Friends.
Yeah, Friends. He did some work on News Radio, I think, at least the pilot. And he's just clearly that, he knows how to do that. And I like that. It's like, I was thinking about that. Like an ensemble sitcom is like a thing of its own. Like an ensemble drama is never, the ensemble is never all together, usually. Yeah. Especially in, because the drama sets are more realistic and they're not just, here's a big space where we stick a bunch of people at a table or whatever. Yeah. Or in a bar. But it always makes it, and I had been watching a lot of Cheers lately, so it stands out more even there that just everything feels like alive, like it's happening, like it's never, like on, Night Court, which is a good show, but like when they would cut to someone making a joke on the aside, it felt like a cut. Yeah. Almost like a laugh-in cut to like, here's this other stage where someone's doing something, and then we'll cut back to the story. Where Cheers and Taxi, I think, too, like you can see other people are doing stuff in the background. Like Cheers, you see people across the bar, like doing business and stuff, and then they may even react to something somebody says. Yeah. And there's a nice life to that I like.
That's well said. I agree with that. That's a good point.
Alex Rieger wrote that for me.
I mean, another thing is I think there's certain people of a certain age and people will love this show, even though it wasn't like a huge hit. I think you'd see probably like a lot of critics because of like those sort of humanistic and character-based elements of it. Yeah. I will say though, when you go back and look, especially if you watch the show, or if you even kind of looking back over the episodes when we were deciding what to look for, I mean, it stands out how many really sitcom-y premises they had and went with. Like, there's I think in general, like the earlier first couple of seasons are a little bit more grounded, and then they get more with like some of the more out there premises. But if you go through like the whole run, there's like an episode where Bobby, I think, pet sits like Tony's fish and kills the fish. Right. And they have to pretend, there's one where like Alex's ex-wife sleeps with Louie to get back at him. Just all these things like, and characters that have to pretend, or Louie wants to go back to his high school reunion and impress. Yeah. So he pretends he's somebody he's not because he wants to. Right. All these like really stock situations that it's not like Taxi was like reinventing the wheel. Yeah. But they executed those very well, and they're usually like the acting and the writing is good enough that it overcame like some of those like kind of ridiculous plots, I think. Right. Like I watched one and the summary seemed like totally stock, which is Jim has to move in with Louie. Yeah. So you think, oh, that's what it's going to be. But so first of all, Jim had to move in because he was living in a condemned building and it got knocked down by a wrecking ball while he was eating his cereal. Yes. And then he moves the whole, like he wants to sleep in the, at work, and Louie won't let that happen. And then Louie's, I think rightly so, he knows he's trying to call out the hypocrisy of the other people because he's like, oh, one of you will take him. You're his good friends, right? And they're all sort of like coming up with dumb excuses, but you can tell they don't want to. And so then Jim, being Jim, is like, I'll move in with you. Yeah. And he ends up burning down the place. Yeah. So you never actually see them rooming together. Yeah. There's no time for that. Right. And it's interesting. Usually when they do this stuff, they wind up revealing things about character, too. Like in the episode we're going to talk about has sort of like I don't think it's a bad like stock premise, but it's kind of more of like a sitcom-y kind of thing, but it turns into like something that actually is pretty revealing along the way about a lot of people in there. And the show did that really well. I do think it's the kind of series where if you grew up watching it, or if you just watched it when it was on, not really growing up, like it was more of an adult sitcom, I think. Right, but like people that really watch it, they probably they could rattle off a bunch of episodes. I think it's memorable in like a lot of individual episodes. It's the kind of show where like, oh, the one where so-and-so. Some of the other shows we've talked about, as you've alluded to, they're not necessarily have those standout episodes. You sort of remember, like, we've talked about things, we remember the nostalgia of having watched the show, but then when we talk about it, we don't remember like a lot of standout episodes necessarily, whereas I think something like Taxi has more memorable episodes, and it was just executed on a different level. Yeah. One last general comment. I don't know why I'd never thought about this before, but in that period, like Paramount was like a big home to sitcoms. Mm-hmm. Like this, and then Cheers, but like all the Happy Days and all that stuff. Right.
Family Ties, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it almost seems like kind of like Universal had that reputation for crime shows,
Right. And
like maybe
was,
Paramount was a sitcom place.
Yeah, and I think the creators like were kind of moved to Cheers, and I think that's kind of maybe part of the reason why. I mean, there's different stories as to why ABC dumped Taxi,
Right.
but I think part of it, what was going on was the creators that sort of moved on were developing Cheers around the time Taxi was kind of winding down.
Yeah, and it moved to NBC and aired like in the time slot after Cheers, like the first season of Cheers,
Yeah,
right?
that's what it was. Had been on ABC, and then I think they moved it to try to get the ratings up. But
Yeah.
So let me just point this out now because I was looking into this because I was looking at the ratings of Taxi a little bit, and it was actually like a top 10 hit its first year. I think it was like number 9 and then number 13, and then it just falls out. So I was curious, being a naturally inquisitive gent. So I went and looked at, okay, well, let's see when it was on. Well, it turned out the first year it was on after, it started out after Three's Company on ABC.
Okay.
And at the time, like the top shows on TV were Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, Three's Company, and they were all together. So you had this massive night, and then you had Taxi, like I think on Tuesdays. And Taxi did very well. When they moved Taxi to Thursdays, it wasn't like the opposition. I mean, I think it's one year it was on against Magnum, maybe. But Magnum was kind of more Magnum wasn't at its peak yet.
Right, it was early.
So Magnum wasn't like a top 10, like the smack number 1 show it would become. But so it doesn't look like the competition was what got it, but it does look like once it got away from that time slot, the audience really didn't follow it. Mm-hmm. And my suspicion is that it was just never the kind of show that was going to be a huge hit.
Yeah.
And so it kind of had to sell itself on quality. And moving to NBC, I mean, multiple sources say like HBO was considering picking it up for a while, which would have been very unusual.
Yeah.
It seems like back then, but it just didn't make it. And the more I watch it, I kind of think, well, yeah, despite some of these broader elements, it has a certain maybe it just wasn't destined to be like the smash hit like Happy Days or something. I mean, it seems like a totally different show to go from Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, Three's Company to Taxi. It seems to me like this kind of show would work much better today. Or even like it was ahead of its time in the sense that sort of like urban setting, and maybe like even like 5 years or 10 years more, it probably would have worked a lot better. Maybe and been more popular. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it did rack up, like we said, it racked up like I think 3 like it ran a big Emmys, like outstanding comedy series. It was very well received, and it was a popular show. So with critics. I was
gonna say, I mean, besides the writers, I mean, we kind of mentioned it, but even with it not being a huge hit, the cast really, for the most part, went on to bigger and better things. Mm-hmm. Or bigger things, maybe not better. But, like you said, it launched at Danny DeVito, and he certainly has had a nice career. Mm-hmm. And Tony Danza did pretty well with Who's the Boss.
Mm-hmm.
And, Judd Hirsch, he was already established, of course. But
he's had
a number of career. Sitcoms. He's on TV right now. On, what was it? Superior Donuts. Yeah. I haven't seen that, but it's good to know he's there, and so it's got a good reputation that way too. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of shows that get kind of canceled early, like they're still the starting ground for a lot of people. True. Sometimes. And
I mean, it had a pretty good run. 5 seasons and as many episodes as it has is pretty good.
Yeah.
But yeah, it seems to have this kind of reputation. I think there was a lot of I do remember like a lot of publicity around it when it moved from ABC to NBC.
Yet, like I remember that happening.
Yeah, but I don't remember it being an NBC show per se. It's like I sort of more remember the campaign about it, but I still think of it as an ABC show. I don't think of it as an NBC show. So
no.
So so should we? I mean, I'm sure we have some other things to say about the theme song.
I love the theme song.
Yeah, the Bob James composition.
Yeah, a little jazzy.
With the shot of the cab, driving around.
Right. Credits zooming at you.
Yeah, it's really perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, when we talk about sort of like the melancholy air, to me that music really sets the tone right away.
Yeah.
That's one of the best TV theme songs.
Right at the end of it, you get to see the New York skyline pretty well. And
yeah, that's one of the most well-remembered things of the show, and something I look forward to each time I see it, actually.
Like, I don't know if you could reboot it as an Uber. Yeah. Because Uber drivers aren't all hanging out in the same place. By the way, there's right around the corner from me, there's a taxi depot. And it's a cool, like, not quite Art Deco building, but like a cool, like, sort of building. It's on a wedge between 2 roads, and it has a like a ramp for cars to drive down and
Nice.
stuff, and I'm kind of fascinated by it.
Maybe we should go in there sometime, see if there's a bunch of guys hanging out playing cards and
That would be cool.
shooting the breeze.
I am like all curious about that on the show too. It's like, well, what do they do? Why are they hanging out? Like, are they waiting for a call?
That's what it seems like. It seems like you've got to, like,
But some of them are out on the road.
yeah.
I don't know how taxis work.
Well, you have a dispatcher, like Louie's a dispatcher that's supposed to give them assignments.
Right.
And you have an assistant dispatcher, like that Jeff, who's with them in the cage there.
Right. So
like,
my assumption
two
of how that
dispatchers.
works is you're out driving your cab,
Mhm.
and if someone calls for a cab,
Mhm.
the dispatcher then says, "Hey, we need a
Yeah.
cab at 14th Street."
But you're already out.
Yeah, but it's whoever's out, kind of like a police, can say, "Oh, I'll get that."
Yeah.
And in the meantime, if they're not getting calls, then they're picking up people.
Right. I think a lot of it
As
is
they
that
go.
they're supposed to happen to be between shifts, and
Yeah,
just like
okay.
hanging out in anticipation of like cars coming in that they
Right.
can then take out.
And they
you know,
don't have lives.
Right. And Lack is the mechanic, so he's got an excuse to be there the whole time.
Right, and Louie has an excuse.
Like if it was more realistic, I guess you wouldn't have like all of them in there so often at
Yeah.
the same time, like
Yeah.
all the drivers. But
Right. And they do have like a restaurant they hang out too.
yeah, Mario's.
Mario's.
The Italian
And
restaurant.
like Jim buys that later or something.
He does.
And it
Yeah,
becomes
that's right.
Jim's Mario's.
Yeah. Yep. That's one of their main offsets, and we see like the apartments of, I guess, pretty much all of them through the course, or like a lot of them through the course, and then
Yeah.
Latka develops. He gets a wife, Carol Kane, joins
Right,
the
yeah.
cast later, and so yeah, I mean, the show would definitely take us into like the personal lives and in the apartments. But I prefer one of the reasons I picked this episode, which is the Great Race from season 2, episode 8, November 6, 1979. It's about like taxi driving.
Yeah.
And not that I don't like the episodes that don't, but I just kind of like this episode because it showed them as cab drivers, and the fact that there are things about the occupation that meant something to them, and we see like the space where they work in like a lot, and we see them like driving around cabs. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah. I agree.
Not all of the shows did that. There were some that they really go way off and
Right.
into other jobs and into other like places and settings, which is fine. But this is a good example of the show kind of getting at what it's
Yeah.
this sort of hyper version of being a cab driver, I guess. So there's a competition. Louis,
Right.
He's been getting yelled at upstairs.
Yeah,
There's,
I
like,
was interested in
mysterious-
that too. Yeah.
Yeah, there's and it's an interesting geography to this thing. But there's the big boss like has his office upstairs, and I guess he's had Louis on the carpet yelling at him because they're not getting enough money. Their bookings aren't high. So Louis starts talking trash about how he could outdrive any of them and pick up all the more. They keep saying like more bookings, which see that's the funny thing, implying that a good cab driver is going around and not needing a dispatcher even to get the calls, or can pick up some of this stuff and has instincts to get this stuff on his own, and I guess is efficient enough to get people where they are and then pick up another fare.
Yeah.
So he starts talking trash, and they take exception to it, and Bobby in particular challenges him on that because Louis says he get out. Louis says he didn't say put your money where your mouth is yet, but he says, well, why don't you call me on that? And Bobby says, okay, let's see you do it, essentially. And Bobby gets Alex into this competition.
Right.
He says that Alex could out earn him over like the course of like an 8-hour shift, and Alex is a little reluctant. And Alex even says, and I thought this was interesting, everybody else is naturally inclined to pile against Louis, who's kind of being a jerk to them. But Alex says, well, when Louis was a driver, he actually was a very good driver. He brought in a lot of fares and everything.
Yeah.
So Alex doesn't want to get into it, and Alex has this competitive side, which you
Right.
see in other episodes. He's like a compulsive gambler, too. So he doesn't really want to get into all this, but Louis goads him into it, and Bobby really was the one that goads him into it by kind of doing one of those sitcom kind of deals where he's like, you're not going to talk to me. Alex can easily outrace you. And Alex, oh, whoa. And Bobby keeps going on and like egging Louis on. And then Louis eggs Alex on because Louis actually is game for it. And,
Yeah. He calls Alex a chicken.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's brilliantly played.
Yeah. I'll just say it. I like Danny DeVito, but watching him in this, I was just like almost mesmerized by everything he was doing, just because he's so physical, and
He is.
he's like using his being, short
Yeah.
to his advantage. Like, he does all these things. He hangs off cab doors. He
Yeah.
he jumps up on a bench and kind of does a little dance, and
Yeah.
he's just and totally into being just a jerk.
Yeah, he's brilliant when he's inside the cage, but when he comes outside of the cage, he has all these other things to do too.
Yeah.
In this case, I mean, he's going back and forth to chicken, and Alex is like, "Call me a chicken one more time, and and you're on. I'm gonna knock your, I'm gonna beat you or something." And then
he's out of the cage, and clearly him and Jeff are simpatico, at least in that moment, because Jeff is already handing him the microphone before he even puts out his hand.
Louie does a little nod to him and acknowledges that he's doing it.
Yeah,
he kind of and he reaches out. Yeah, and
this
grabs
is
it.
the PA microphone. And just, he's only a foot away from Alex.
Yeah, he does it very theatrically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's You have to see it, yes. And he kind of tilts his head a little bit and builds up, has this slight pause with a great timing, and starts clucking like a chicken again, and totally rubbing it in, and with this glee in his face, and so Alex has to do the competition.
Yeah.
So they hastily assemble the thing, and they say whoever gets the most money wins.
Yeah. And the drivers pretty much all bet for Alex.
Yeah.
Against Louie.
And Louie's covering all of it. Yeah.
Yeah, he'll cover all of it, and then, except for Elaine, because she doesn't have enough money. To bet, and so that leads Louie to do a side bet with her.
Yes, a problematic side bet today,
yes.
but it's a different time, we mind you. But if Elaine will go on a date with him, she has to go on a date with him.
Right. Although he has to spend. He asks her how much he would need to spend for a date with her, and she says $500.
It's worth it to him.
It's worth it to him. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the big long threads of the show is Louie's
lust.
Yes, his lecherous lust for Elaine, for Nardo.
Yeah.
So so that adds to the stakes, I guess.
Louie asks for his bag from Jeff.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. He gets a beat up leather jacket,
a
cabbie hat, and a scarf.
Yeah, he's raring to go.
And then it is the scarf that he throws out of the car, right, to Elaine.
Yes, I think that's he says my
colors.
My colors. Yeah.
And she's grossed out.
Yeah. So they're into it, and the whole garage is into it.
Yeah.
They kind of all sort of bond together about this, but it's pretty amusing. And Alex asks what the rule. The only rule is that there are no rules.
That's right. Oh, it makes it easier to cheat.
Yeah. So they're at it, and then I guess much of the episode after that is it's mostly Alex.
Yeah.
But you see them, they're a little style they did where you sort of see them in the doing the cab drives.
Yeah.
So you see looking into the cab.
Right, and getting information from the radio.
Yeah.
From the people back at the
right.
Who's making what. And
so they're making updates and keeping tabs on each other, and they have Alice is kind of getting stuck with unpromising fares that would waste his time. And
right. He gets some indecisive nuns. They want to go to a movie.
Right.
That was good. Where do you want to go? A movie.
Yeah.
Could you be more specific?
A little bit more specific.
They can't decide between.
It's one wants to see Sound of Music.
Yeah.
Which they've already seen 9 times or something like that.
Yeah.
And the other one is.
It's like an animated thing, or no, the Muppet movie.
Oh, the Muppet movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
One wants to see the Muppet movie, but the other one she's got.
She doesn't like that frog.
Yeah. She doesn't like the frog.
And he actually kicks them out.
Yeah, he does. He's in a hurry, and he's trying to first you can never see Sound of Music too many times,
Yeah.
Trying to encourage them to just pick something, and he does boot them out of the cab.
Yeah, but then he gets them back in.
He does,
and finally, just yells at them so they make a decision.
Yeah,
I guess he knows where the Muppet movie's playing.
Yeah,
because they finally decide Muppets, and he just drives off.
Yeah, well, that's part of being a good cabbie.
Yeah,
you know where all the movies are playing, which theaters.
Probably do, or did.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, they're all sitting around reading the paper every night. So
right. Yeah.
That's probably part of it.
Yeah, and in the pre-multiplex days, it might have been. You might have just known. Oh, that's at the whatever the Bijou.
That's a good point.
Yeah. I think his second fare is my favorite, just because I love this actor, James Hong.
The great James Hong. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Who,
ubiquitous man of Asian descent. Who.
Yeah. For me, his chief role is the guy at the Chinese restaurant in Seinfeld.
Ah, okay, yes.
Yeah, and I won't do my impression of him because it would be uncouth. But
yeah.
Whenever I hear the name Cartwright, I think of that episode.
Yeah.
Fondly.
Yeah. So and he's great, and in this one he doesn't really speak English, and he's almost literally throwing money at Alex to take him like a ridiculously short distance.
Yeah.
And Alex plays with the idea of actually keeping it, and it appears he does, but then the guy tips him. He gives him a big tip on top of like the stack of like $100 bills he's given him. And Alex eventually has he decides he can't take it. His conscience catches up with him, I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And he gives him the money.
Right.
He
It
keeps,
only takes
a fair
5.
amount and gives the guy back. And the guy appreciates. Alex communicates what he's doing, and the guy appreciates it, which is nice. And in the meantime, Louie's like trying to take advantage of who he can, and he's hoping for when it's close. He's hoping for to the powers above, and he gets a blind guy. Is it a blind guy? Is New York for the first time?
Yeah, that's the. I think first he got the cab inspector.
Yeah, the cab inspector. Yes,
he's like, that's the UN. That's the second time you've been around the block. And he's a cab inspector, and he's like, he wants Louie's license, and of course Louie gives him Tony's license.
Yeah, that's right. And he insults the cab, the inspector a couple times to boot.
Right. Oh, yeah, he says his family looks like chimpanzees.
Yeah, it looks like a
chimp
act I saw once. Give Louie credit, he doesn't back down. He's an equal opportunity offender.
Yeah, and it's later we'll see that actually plays into the results, some of his behavior, but it's just funny on the face of it too.
Yeah.
And then as soon as the guy gets out of the cab, he pulls another license out of his, and it's Bobby's.
Yeah, next up, Bobby Wheeler. And he cackles as he goes back on into the night.
Yeah, and he gets the blind guy, and he's already like basically salivating.
Yeah.
And then the guy's like, it's for his first time in New York, and he has to go to somewhere in Brooklyn, and Louie drives him there, and then he says it's some outrageous amount of money.
Yeah.
And the guy had been counting the clicks on the meter. That's something else.
Some other way that he knows.
Louie says like he's really big.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, if you are, then you're talking out of your belly button.
Right. Which makes I wonder if you assume that Louie was like this all the time, but part of me wants to think that Louie was actually like a naturally great cabbie that cheated even though he didn't have to. Mm-hmm. Kind of like an athlete, like a star athlete, like Barry Bonds, who allegedly took PEDs even though he was already like the best player in baseball. But like, I kind of look at Louie the same way. He was maybe arguably one of the greatest cabbies all the time, but he got these edges just because he couldn't resist himself. He had to. Yeah. Part of it just to make money, but part of it just because he could. Right. Yeah. And then not being a people person. Yeah. Well, he's naturally may have felt like he needed to cheat because of that. Yeah. And Alex gets actually a nice, what he thinks is a bad fare, and turns out to be a good one. Mm-hmm. It's like an old lady with 8 grocery bags. Yeah, and he's they're kind of saying on the radio on the other end, she's probably not going to go very far. She's going to waste your time. You're going to have to unpack, unload her groceries and take them up for her and everything. Right. To his credit, he does it anyway. That's why I like it. Even knowing that, he's like, this race is over anyway. It's like, I'm going to... Although you could argue that he's a little cavalier about the fact that, his friend Elaine's going to have to go on a date with this vermin, and everybody else in the garage is going to lose like $100 a pop to Louie. Yeah. So he's a little blasé about it, if you look at it that way. But he is not going to turn away this old lady. No. And he helps her into the cab and starts asking her questions, and she reveals that she has to go get groceries for a lot of her friends that can't get around anymore, and are all over. Yeah, one's in the Bronx. One's in Long Island. Yeah. And one's in New Jersey. She lives in New Jersey. Yeah, she lives in. Yeah. And I think someone in Brooklyn or something too. Yeah. And it's a bit of a windfall. Yeah. So he goes to give her a peck on the cheek, and she like grabs him and pulls him down into the seat of the cab. So yeah. Alex is not always unlucky in love. So I think that's the main deal with the fares that they pick up.
Yeah.
And that's like the bulk of the episode, really, is those.
Right.
Then they get back to kind of settle up.
Yeah.
And they do the tally. I don't remember the tallies, but they reveal Louie's number first. It's like just over 200 or something. Or
Yeah.
Counting up the fares, and Tony's like in charge of.
Right. He's counting Alex's.
Yeah.
Seems like not a good idea.
It's funny that like Tony's the guy doing the. I mean, Jeff was the guy holding the
Jeff,
money for the bets.
Yeah, and someone else counted Louie's.
Okay. Yeah, maybe it was
because they put it up while Tony's still counting.
Okay.
And Alex is kind of hovering over him, but because one of those other episodes I watched, Tony had a big problem doing math.
Yeah. I know what you mean. It was at the restaurant, and he was trying to figure out the bill.
The bill.
Yeah. So, it comes down, and it turns out, like, after they do the fares, Alex does lose, but it's close.
Right.
But Alex is the loser, and everybody's, like, disappointed. And Louie salivating.
Right.
More than the money, the thought of,
the blind.
Nardo is what gets him going. So, I feel what
Alex
says
is then
exactly
counting some other money.
Right.
And, what's that? And it's his tips. And he's got a lot on tips.
Yeah. He got, like, $40 in tips, I think.
And then Louie got like 80 cents.
Yeah, right.
So the question is, do tips count or not?
Yeah.
And because no one said they didn't count.
No one said they did count.
Yeah. Well, that's true.
But all they said, as Louie points out, no one said they did count. But they said it's whoever brings in the most money.
Yeah.
So
Louie's saying it's the meter only. But yeah.
Bobby suggests I could see it's definitely an interesting question. I would have liked to have seen Robert Conrad and Gabe Kaplan and Telly Savalas debate this.
Yeah.
This is one of the great TV debates of the era, I think.
Right.
But I think it's Bobby. They decide like they need a neutral observer, somebody that didn't bet any money, which I'm not sure if that's enough to be an impartial observer in this kind of thing. But, But Latka does have as good a relationship with Louie as anybody. So this is just Latka because he did not bet any money on the race.
Yeah. Louie does kind of attempt to threaten his job, but Alex, well, if you do that, I'm calling the whole thing off.
Yeah. Yeah, and after a little bit of they always do tips count? Of course they do. That's
right.
So Alex is the winner because the tips put him over the top.
Yeah,
his big advantage in tips, and there's a nice little lesson there about Alex not compromising his character and still winning anyway. So I think that was a pretty good way to resolve the whole thing.
Yeah, and Louie, I mean, he just had to lose.
Yeah.
I just feel like that character, especially this is the second season.
Yes,
probably never won.
Yeah,
I think probably later in the show they softened him a little bit. Maybe he could have won.
Yeah, I think, and that's something interesting. Like when the American Office came on, I was sort of like, one of the things that sort of bugged me about it was like right away it seemed like they were turning like baby facing him, as I was saying about the main character,
which I think they did,
and they definitely did. And I was now I sort of realize now, like, in a British show you have like 6 episodes a season,
right?
And like 23 episodes a year. You can't necessarily do the same things.
Yeah, that was my concern from why I kind of never got into that show, because I'm like, well, this other version has 12 episodes and like the Christmas specials, and it's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And everything that, if you drag out everything that works there, the romance thing would go on too long, but also that, you couldn't have him be that. He couldn't be David Brent anymore. Yeah. Which I think they figured out. It probably made it an interesting character, like, because I haven't seen enough to know. They were able to just do their own thing. Yeah. Like, in a way, that's probably good.
I think, yeah.
But, you couldn't sustain some of that. I mean, you see that on dramas, too. Like, like ER would introduce some, like Romano, like some person who's just an unrepenting jerk, and then he would be, within a season or two, part of the gang a little bit. Right.
Like Dr. Weaver on that, I think, was like an even better example of that. Like, she was kind of a villain, and slowly added to her character, and you really can't sustain if you're going to have the person be a regular of the cast. Maybe you can. And like Buffalo Bill, Dabney Coleman is kind of like, sort of like this heelish character. I don't think they really compromised him.
Yeah. They didn't have much time.
Yeah, that's true. But Taxi, over the course of 5 seasons, like, you learned a lot more about Louie, and at one point, Louie does go out on a date with Elaine eventually, and you learn more about him, and he sort of like, they definitely show human sides of his character. They have his mom, he has relationships, like he's got a girlfriend, Rhea Perlman, played by Rhea Perlman, and so they sort of like soften him definitely over the years. I don't know if, Taxi fans, you can say, I don't know if you would say that Louie was really, if they got rid of all his rough edges. I think he pretty much stayed pretty consistent to the end, but they didn't make him be like a cartoonish villain the whole time. But he was always pretty loathsome. But
like in the one where Jim burns down his apartment, apparently he loves music. Like he's a piano and a violin.
Yeah.
And Jim saved the violin. It's a nice. And Jim's talking about, he loves this more than anything else in the world. And he hands it to Louie, and Louie's walking around, and you know what's going to happen, but it's still great when it does. Of course, he smashes it over Jim's head. But just the idea that he loves music. Well,
yeah.
What's that about?
Yeah.
He seems to stay really consistent in his outfit.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Gray suit with a vest.
Yeah.
Is his shirt always pink? It seems like it's always pink.
I don't. Yeah, maybe.
It's just an
maybe
interesting thing. And I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
He's got a uniform.
Yeah.
It's like a cartoon character.
Yeah. He's one of the great characters of all time, really.
Yeah.
Louie. Yeah, I would say I think he and the show stayed consistently good right to the end. They had some changes like we talked about, but
yeah, he might have been a reason I didn't find it appealing when I did see it too. Just again, like I think we've talked about before, like sometimes when a character is like a jerk or uptight or something, you have that reaction of not liking them, which means the actor is doing the right job, but then you don't necessarily want to be around them,
right,
and watch it, but I think that's more a kid, a younger person reaction than.
Yeah, I think so too. Like with me, and I think a lot of times though, the thing I would have would be like, why are these characters hanging around this character?
Yeah.
In this case, they have to because he's their boss.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
there's like a built-in excuse there. So
yeah.
So that's a good reason for them all to be hanging together.
Yeah.
And there are times where Louie, is kind of a slime and has to. He's kind of like got to beg them for help, and
right.
He doesn't totally go babyface, but
yeah, the whole thing with the cage too is cool because he's like when he's in there he's taller than everyone.
Yeah,
and then he walks out and
but
he never loses, like he's just got this assuredness that he is 7 feet tall.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah,
and so him and Alex. Alex is probably my favorite character on the show.
Yeah.
Even though he's kind of a contradiction sometimes, but I just like his sort of like that everyman persona. He's one of like the classic examples of that, of sort of like the rock and the stability, but somebody that's got his own issues.
Yeah.
And the way he reacts to, I think that's another thing. The way the other characters react to Louie is so entertaining that it's kind of nice having a jerk character around that they can all play off of. And Alex is kind of like the moral compass of the garage, really.
Right.
Well-meaning, not always correct, and there's some times where he gets a little sanctimonious, and
and his lack of ambition could be an issue.
Yeah, now that's interesting. There's now there's some episodes in any show where you go 5 seasons, but there's one episode where he actually goes to it's like Broadway and becomes like a production assistant, like a gopher or something like that. And it turns out that like he always had a dream to be like a Broadway guy or something like that, or work in the theater. It's like, we're sometimes, I think that was probably a later season episode, now that I think about it. But yeah, that whole thing of him is just quote unquote just a cabbie.
Right.
And there were some times where he regrets that, I think, and sometimes when his ex-wives were all in, but but the point is though, he's reflective.
Yeah.
He's like the one character that's really most, kind of self-reflective and kind of looks at all this stuff and thinks about it. And that's interesting to me.
Like a Bob Newhart kind of character, where like the center that like wacky people can be around.
Yeah, and
he can react to.
And even has his own deadpan reaction sometimes.
Yeah.
Now, I used to be quite not a big fan of Mary Lou Henner either, but I appreciate her a lot more now than I did before. I think now that she's not hosting her talk shows and that sort of thing, but she does a pretty good job in the show. I like her.
Yeah. Tony Danza is Tony Danza.
Now, the show started out with like there was this Randall Carver played like this John Burns character who was pretty generic, and he left quickly. And then Jim came on. Jim is probably like a lot of people's favorite character. And then there's Tony Danza and Jeff Conaway. Jeff Conaway left before the end of the show, and I don't know. I think of all the characters like Bobby's. I kind of like him, and I like Jeff Conaway's hair is always fun to watch. But, he doesn't get a lot to do a lot of times. I mean, he's got some episodes revolved around him being a bad actor or like a struggling actor.
Right.
But he doesn't stand out to me, and I don't think Tony Danza does either the way that some of the other characters do.
Yeah. I saw a thing that said that Sam Simon said, like, on Howard Stern or something, that there was some episode where he wasn't around, like Jeff Conaway wasn't around, and they just gave his lines to other actors and got as good a reading or better readings and realized he wasn't too necessary. Maybe
we don't need this many people hanging around the garage. Well, of all the people that went on to other things after the show, I think Jeff Conaway would be the one that unfortunately, it didn't seem like, in retrospect, not a great career move leaving the show.
He looked pretty rough in that episode already. I don't know what his situation was then, but he was in his 20s?
I guess, yeah. Well, it must have been. Well, this was
79?
Just a couple years after Grease.
Yeah. He looked, just rough.
Yeah.
Some of it's because he's really thin.
Yeah.
Too, but he does have a kind of he's very energetic, and and that was where I knew him from. Like I didn't see Grease until I was much, like in my 20s.
No, you
I was
poor
like,
deprived child.
It's the guy from Taxi.
No, Grease was a staple of my childhood. Every year when it was on ABC, I watched it. So
yeah.
But yeah, I imagine they probably maybe thought he would be a bigger breakout in the show than he was. But
yeah,
I mean it's tough to. Can you imagine trying to stand out on a show that has Danny DeVito, Christopher Lloyd, and Andy Kaufman?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's taken away, somebody that's maybe more classically trained, like a Judd Hirsch or something like that, who can hold his own. But that's tough competition.
It is.
And they had, like guest stars and talented people on the show throughout the run. So, yeah, there's a lot of talent, like you said, in front of the camera on this show.
And then there are all the, the stories about the behind-the-scenes stuff with Kaufman, and which I don't know all of that, but I guess there are contradictions about it, did that really happen or not, and stuff like the whole thing. Like, he had a part of his contract was that his Tony Clifton persona had to be on 2 episodes or something.
Yeah.
But then when he showed up as Tony Clifton, he got Tony Clifton fired by being so obnoxious. I don't know. That's kind of brilliant.
As anything with Andy Kaufman, there's always going to be some doubt about how much of that is on the level.
Right. I believe that I saw that Sam Simon thing again, like him saying, well, he was always professional, and that's just Bob Zmuda trying to continue to
perpetuate the Andy
the
Kaufman
myth, because he has a stake in that.
Right. And I would just want to mention there was a book that came out, I think, in the late 80s, like Hailing Taxi. Mm-hmm. It's long out of print now, I'm sure. And after I went through the show, like burned through a lot of the show through like Netflix, I actually got a used copy of it. And unfortunately, I don't have it anymore. But it was a great resource, and it got into a lot of this stuff, like the behind the scenes. I think there were some issues like among the cast, but some of the network maneuvering and stuff like that. I mean, there's a story that James L. Brooks pulled some kind of power play with, or it was James Burrows pulled a power play with ABC that wanted to not air the episode with Ted Danson as like a hairdresser that sort of screws over Elaine, and
right.
That there was some kind of power play that they demanded that they do air the episode as planned, and then as a result ABC soured on it, and that's why they dumped the show. At least that's what I think it was. James L. Brooks would have had the power to do that. I think that's what James L. Brooks said. I read.
Huh.
So there's a lot of interesting behind the scenes stuff going on about Taxi.
Yeah.
Another reason that maybe the show has this interesting place in pop culture. It's not a huge hit, but the people that remember it, I think, speak very fondly of it. And maybe the most famous episode is the one where Reverend Jim has to take his driving test, and has the famous scene where he's taking the test and he's cheating, and they're trying to help him through it. And I'm not going to butcher it if I talk about it here,
Yeah.
but it's something. I think it always ranks high in like the most memorable TV moments. It's like the one taxi moment you see in there. I think that's a lot. I think it's like Reverend Jim's Space Odyssey or something's the name of the episode, but it's maybe the most famous single episode of the show. And I think we decided not to look at that one because it's been talked about before. But
And it wasn't available.
oh, that's right. Yeah, we should mention the whole series is on DVD, and right now it's on Hulu, but not all of it is on Hulu, frustratingly. And like I think a lot of the music's cut on the DVDs, which is kind of standard for Paramount.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not sure why all the episodes aren't on Hulu. But there's a good batch of them. But like some of the most memorable ones that I was kind of looking for are not on there, unfortunately.
Shame.
It's a show that it's been on Nick at Night, and MeTV.
Yeah. Are they on like the CBS thing? Maybe.
That's a good question. I'm pretty sure that's one that's on there, but not all the episodes.
Okay.
I'm assuming it's maybe the same assortment that's on Hulu, if not less. But certainly not the whole run.
Yeah.
But it's readily accessible on DVD, and it's never really gone out of the public consciousness totally. And I think the Andy Kaufman, the Man on the Moon movie with Jim Carrey, and the whole sort of surge of Andy Kaufman nostalgia helped keep the show in the consciousness too. And the fact
because
that
most of them are in it, right?
Yeah, they make cameo. They play themselves like a lot of them. Yeah. Although I think
DeVito's playing a character.
Yeah, he's like his manager.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, sort of things like that. But I think for a while, I think the Andy Kaufman sort of saga almost overshadowed Taxi.
Yeah.
And now I think when you look back at it with a little distance and Andy Kaufman was a big part of the show, but to me he was far from the center of the show. It was more the heart of it was like these working class people and
right.
You talk workplace sitcoms. I mean, this is like a real blue collar sitcom too.
Yeah.
And I think you saw distinctions between like Elaine Elaine Nardo, her sort of aspirational, to be like upper class, and sort of art is like a vocation that's like that. And Jim, you had his inheritance and his rich relatives, his father and everything. So class was actually kind of something that played throughout the series a lot too. I
saw a description about one where Louie like moves into a fancy apartment building.
Oh yeah.
And has to maybe another one where he has to kind of pretend.
I think Penny Marshall's in that one as a guest star. Yeah, and I think she's as Penny Marshall. I think if I recall correctly.
Wow.
And the idea is like she wants to get in the apartment too. She's also she's either in there or she's applying for it as well, and worried about that she can't get in because it's so exclusive.
Wow.
So I mean, there's like that whole thread of people like with dreams, and it's pretty explicit sometimes. They're actually talking about their dreams and like I want to get out of here.
Right. It's like Tony's a bad boxer, right?
Yeah.
And Bobby's a bad actor.
Yeah. Yeah, they've all got stuff, and just kind of failed relationships. Elaine's got she's a single mom.
Yeah.
Alex has a history with his ex-wife, and sort of a checkered romantic history, and a lot of stuff going on with these characters. Yeah, it's interesting. And one thing I definitely want to mention before I forget is the distinctive like end credits, like the title card thing at the end.
Yeah,
where you have the
actors.
Yeah, or no, I'm thinking of the very end, the Goodnight Mr. Goodnight Mr. Charles, or Goodnight Mr. Is it Goodnight Mr. Charles?
Oh, what is it? It's like James Charles Walters or something? Yeah,
Goodnight Mr. Walters. Yeah. And you see this guy walking along.
Yeah.
And that used to freak me out when I was a kid. Because this was going to be late, and just for some reason, like you'd be watching that, and this comes on, and for some reason that really like creeped me out.
Yeah.
It's just like the brusqueness of it, and you kind of after the music, and you have that. It was very sudden. It just seemed like something like unsavory about that.
Right. And what is that even?
It's just like the production.
Is that like James L. Brooks's company or something? I don't know what the Walters part is.
It's
like
if one of the executive. Yeah, it's.
Or is some other, or just some.
Yeah, it's. There's I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
Check out the book Hailing Taxi, or we'll put this in the show notes because I don't remember the story, but there's a story behind it, but it really stood out to me as a kid. Like it was. This is probably, now that I think about it, this is probably one of the reasons I didn't watch it more often, because that when I was a little kid, that end thing kind of like spooked me out a little bit. I can't quite describe why.
A lot of mysteries to this. That and the period and Ed.
Yeah.
Weinberger.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, it's kind of like the whole, like one of my, I'm not a big art guy. I'm no Elaine Nardo, mind you.
Right, yeah.
But I do like Edward Hopper.
Yeah.
And like it seems like you could put like a lot of Edward Hopper paintings or something in this, like some of the night scenes,
Yeah.
and even that scene with the rah, rah, walking off at the end. Seems like that office could be like an Edward Hopper painting.
Yeah.
So, I would like to see you get a good Edward Hopper rendition of like these
The taxi cast.
the dispatch station there.
Yeah.
And see what it would look like, because there's something about he sort of captures like that weird mix of like Americana but sort of a darker side to it. And
Yeah.
despite being so wacky, there's a lot of darkness kind of running through Taxi.
Yeah. Any Edward Hopper-esque painters out there who want to do that up for us?
Yeah, I'd love to run it with this episode.
We're always mulling merch that we're never going to be a good print, right?
Well, there's got to be a lot of there's one thing we know, there's a lot of Edward Hopper-esque painters out there.
Yeah.
And for another thing, a big set of those are probably listening to the show.
Right.
So I think, again, you've hit on something.
Yeah.
Another potential opportunity.
Yeah.
And we'll give you a Louie De Palma-esque deal on your artistic property.
Right.
We promise.
I have one more question for you, since you're in a management position at work.
Kayfabe. But yeah, okay.
How would you feel about working out of a cage?
How would I feel about working out of a cage?
Yeah. With the microphone, like all the accoutrements of Louie's cage.
Well, I think I could get used to it.
Yeah.
As long as I had like a microphone like that.
Right.
Because to me, I think having the ability to yell at people and sing and say dumb things over a microphone would be more important to me than freedom of movement.
Right. It looks like a spacious cage.
Yeah, I mean, there's some room in there, even sharing it with another guy a lot of times. So
a lot of paperwork and stuff.
Yeah, I don't know if I don't remember ever actually going really far inside that cage, but
No.
I imagine who knows what's in there.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe we don't want to. We don't want to know.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I wouldn't like it so much after all, but
Yeah.
how do you think like my employees would feel about their supervisor working in a cage?
I think it would depend on your attitude, really. But, I guess if your employees were all working in like one big room like that and could just, if they needed you, just get up and walk over to the cage.
Yeah.
That might be helpful.
It's bad. What is it now, Kogel?
Yeah. I don't know. And, just a table nearby to play cards.
Yeah.
In between shifts, I guess. Would be no time to. Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually thought of another question. Do you think Louie De Palma subscribes to the theory when the going gets tough, the tough get going?
It's an excellent question. I think he does. I think there's significant evidence to suggest that he does. What say you?
I was going to say maybe when the going gets tough, the tough get tougher, which maybe is the same. I don't really know what that saying quite means anyway.
Yeah.
But it just seems like he would like dig in and be even worse.
Ah, I see.
If things got rough.
Well, I guess
he could be more of a jerk,
I
if
guess,
that's possible.
Yeah. I guess the idea is like going, meaning you get at it.
Okay.
As opposed
So
to
it's the
like
same
go
thing.
away.
Yeah, that's
like when
where
the
it's
tough
confusing.
get going, the tough get out of here.
Yeah, the going gets tough, the tough get take a hike.
Well, it depends on who he's with, I guess. But
Yeah.
it seems to me like Danny. Well, we're talking Danny DeVito or Louis De Palma.
Louie De Palma.
Yeah, Louis De Palma.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, Danny
He doesn't back
DeVito
down from a
seems
challenge.
pretty confident too.
yeah.
I don't, know anything about him as a person, but yeah. But yeah, I was talking to Louie De Palma.
Yeah. Well, in this episode, he puts his money where his mouth is.
Yeah.
And he doesn't back down
Yeah.
from a challenge. So I got to say, yes, he probably does.
Okay.
And we know that, even though he wears the same uniform, probably would look good in a suit once he gets one on, as we found later from DeVito's career. So
that's right. Okay. I'm going to hail a cab now.
All right, good luck.
I don't know where. I'm at home, so it's a little weird, but...
This episode brought to you by the Sunshine Cab Company. We might be shabby, but we've got the kind of crew you'd want to spend half an hour with once a week. This episode also brought to you by Alex Rieger's lack of motivation seminars coming to a community center near you. This episode also brought to you by, who are we kidding, trying to make jokes. You want to laugh? Go watch Taxi, for crying out loud. Join us next time for another exciting episode of Battle of the Network Shows. Learn more, leave feedback, and suggest future episodes at battleofthenetworkshows.com. Follow us on Twitter at BatNetShows, and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/battleofthenetworkshows.
I'm gonna take you up on that silly little contest, and I'll beat you, Lou. You're on.